Okay guys, so we are back and today we are going to be talking about those Thor Ragnarok, numbers from this past weekend. Now, as always, since this is all being reported before it's finalized, they are using some numbers when they look at, like measurements to get what the final total is, and I put final in like a quotation mark. It's usually a million up or down, usually up from what they're actually estimating. So how does Thor compare to the other movies? What lasting effect will it have on the rest of this month, because it is a pretty big month, and of course going on into December. So I think to no one's surprise, it was obvious that this was going to be the biggest Thor opening out of all three movies. The first movie, coming out in 2011, wasn't supposed to make a whole lot of money, considering it was a relatively unknown comic book character getting his big property right after the big boom of superhero movies. Now, of course, after Avengers, you had the actual Thor: The Dark World, and that one did quite significantly better, and went on to even make more profit than movies like Batman v Superman and Man of Steel. So clearly they were heading in the right direction. Now when it comes to Thor Ragnarok, it was quite obvious, with having one of the highest Rotten Tomatoes of all time, that the film was looking at a bright future, you could say, for the God of Thunder. And when you really look at it and what we're going to be talking about, I think the movie's definitely going to have legs going into the second, third, and possibly even beyond the fourth weekend. So as it stands right now, Thor Ragnarok has officially beat Spider-Man Homecoming for the second best opening of 2017. With $118 million estimated. Spider-Man Homecoming getting $117, and the first place going to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 at $146. So not bad for one company to own all three slots. Now, of course, when it comes to the weekend box office numbers, you have to account for Thursday, as that gets slumped into the Friday. So Thor actually opened up Friday, with Thursday combined, obviously, with 45 million. Now, when you include the numbers for how the rest of the weekend goes, usually there's, Sunday kind of remains to be usually the day where they make the least amount of money on a weekend, just because Friday and Saturday are the big rush. So looking at it at 118 million, you can guess that it's probably going to have maybe a 59 to 60% drop in the second week, as it's typical with a comic book movie. Unless your Rotten Tomatoes score tanks for some reason, then you're probably looking at more of a 65%, which we'll talk about at a later date. And by the look of it already, Thor has already passed 400 million worldwide, with the domestic being 118, so it's doing pretty good for itself. Now, going into the second weekend, it still has that free before the third weekend is here, and Justice League is upon it. Now, seeing how the future of Justice League is going to depend largely on the Rotten Tomatoes score and how much people are going to go see the movie, undoubtedly the film is going to have a huge opening weekend, but it all matters, what happens after the loyal fans have seen the movie, which is what the problem was with Batman v Superman. Now, when you look back at Thor, you can quite clearly tell that this movie had a lot going for it, because if you look at the last kid-friendly movie that came out that the parents could also go see and enjoy, largely enjoy it and have a good time, it was actually Spider-Man Homecoming. Ever since that, you've had darker movies like, you've had The War of the Planet of the Apes, you've had other films of that nature, which aren't necessarily targeted at kids. Movies like Thor Ragnarok and Spider-Man Homecoming are targeted at everybody and that family demographic. Now, also it opened up in UK a little bit earlier during the school break that was happening there, which of course was tactical for Marvel to give it that big 1 week head start ahead of the United States to target how much they could really spend on marketing. So when you look at it, no real surprise that they made this much money, which honestly for them is good, but it's going to have to wait and see how big the holdover is, like I said, in about 2 weeks, which the movie's probably going to remain somewhere towards the second spot even when Justice League comes out, and then the impact is really going to be felt from then on out. So overall, pretty good for Thor, considering what happened before with the last movie and how much of a drop-off that had. And since it is the Marvel brand and they have so much loyalty there, you could probably expect it's going to make more than Thor: The Dark World did. I mean, definitely going to make more than that. And right now, estimates are like saying 750 to 800 million for the entire run. When you can, factor that in and consider some of the other stuff that's going in and the heavy fall season we're in, that's pretty damn impressive. And when you really think about it, last year at this time, Doctor Strange came out, and that movie people thought wasn't going to make more than 600 million, went on to break 800. So quite clearly this November spot has worked out for Marvel, just as well as the December spot has worked out for Star Wars. So I think they're pretty safe, but we'll talk about that on the upcoming podcast, and of course more in some other videos where I'll cover more in depth some of these stats and what they mean, and compare the numbers and everything.